Legal risks in real estate. Okay, if you've done a real estate transaction, you probably know that you or your realtor could get into some legal hot water if you don't do it just right. After all, there's a lot of money involved, there's a lot of regulations, and it gets to be kind of complicated. I bet you don't know what are the most common ways that people get into legal trouble and how you can avoid them. So today I want to walk through the top 10 ways that people get into legal problems and how to avoid them. Now, this list, I have it right here, is from the National Association of Realtors. So I did not make it up, and I want to walk through this. I do want to give you a caveat. I am not an attorney. If you have a legal problem or need legal advice, definitely consult an attorney. That's on the list, by the way. And so let's get into it. Number 10, so least on the list, is ADA problems. So this is not very common, but it does not mean that if you're selling your house, you have to have handrails. ADA being the Americans with Disabilities Act. So you might see ramps and handrails and things like that in some houses. You don't have to have that, but if you do have disabilities and need accommodation, your realtor has to be able to work with you, not just to try to find the right kind of house, but also make their office and that kind of thing accommodating. Again, doesn't come up real often. Number 9, and I actually thought this would be higher on the list, is a realtor giving legal advice. So this gets a little bit murky because a realtor is supposed to give you advice, and a lot of it has to do with legal aspects. But where it draws the line is your realtor has to know when to advise you to consult an attorney. So typically, if you get into some disagreement, either before close or after, and there's a lot of money involved, one party wants to back out, they want to get money back, that kind of thing, that's when your realtor should be saying, hey, you might need to consult an attorney. So this is where working with a big company like Coldwell Banker, we have attorneys that help us out, and we pay fees to contribute to that. So that makes it a little bit easier, but definitely be careful if your realtor seems to be giving you legal advice. Number 8 is realtors giving gifts for referrals. So realtors are allowed to charge fees to each other for giving referrals. What we can't do is if you refer someone to me as a realtor and I pay you something as a thank you for that, because that really is not really fair to the friend that you're referring, because essentially they're helping pay a kickback to you, and that's not allowed. Number 7 is environmental issues. So we all know that houses can have a lot of environmental problems: water, mold, lead-based paint, all that kind of stuff. So a realtor doesn't have to be an expert on all those things, but they do have to know when to advise you to get a special inspection or to make sure that things are getting mitigated. And a big part of this is disclosure, which I'm going to get to a little bit later on the list. Number 6 has to do with agents as independent contractors. And honestly, I didn't think this really ranked being number 6 on this list, but it is. So this has to do with agents are independent contractors. They're not typically employees of the broker. So therefore, there's a little bit of distance there legally, and the agent is responsible for a lot of their own legal issues. Again, being with a big company, there tends to be a legal fund or legal support from the company. But it's also important to keep in mind that a lot of realtors are kind of part-time and not necessarily always up to date on all of the laws and things that govern real estate. Number 5 has to do with false advertising. So this is pretty common, and the most common thing that I can think of is the photos that you put for your listing. So most of the time we have a professional photographer, and they come out, and they are allowed to enhance the lighting and that kind of thing. They can do a little bit of photoshopping, but only in terms of the environment around the house. So for example, they can Photoshop in a blue sky because it's okay to assume that sometimes you'd have a blue sky, or a fire in the fireplace, something like that. But they're not allowed to alter the actual home. And same goes with the text of an advertisement. It has to be actual and truthful. So sometimes that can be a problem. We had a case where somebody posted a picture of their house, and they photoshopped in a tree that was blocking the ugly neighbor's house. And obviously you're not allowed to do that. So they did get into legal trouble for that. So something like this, false advertising, it's important to know that the realtor may really most of the time be at fault, but you as the client, the homeowner, you are also on the hook. So there could be fees. There could definitely be a problem with the transaction. Number 4 has to do with antitrust between brokers. So just like with other things, car dealers or grocery stores or stock market or anything, 2 different brokers are not allowed to collaborate on what a pricing strategy should be in a neighborhood or that kind of thing. Most of the time, this isn't going to directly affect the consumer, and it's doesn't seem very common, but it is number 4 on the list of most common things. So something to be aware of. So these last 3 things do tend to be fairly common. And so it's really important to know what they are and how to avoid getting into this kind of trouble. Before I get into those 3 things, I'm still kind of new at making these videos. So I'm trying to figure out the algorithm and how to get more people to see this kind of content. So feel free to like and subscribe. Leave a comment if you could. I'd love to hear what you have to say. So the top 3 ways that consumers and realtors get into trouble in a real estate transaction. Number 3 has to do with fair housing. So fair housing being everybody has a right to buy and sell a house in whatever neighborhood they can if they can afford it. So this used to be fairly common. There used to be redlining, loans, even the federal government kind of restricted neighborhoods that could get a loan. This is illegal, and sometimes it does happen in a little more subtle ways. Some of the things you may not be as aware of are things like if you're selling your house, you're not allowed to say that it's family friendly or no children allowed or that kind of thing, because that does violate the fair housing laws. So keep that in mind. Fair housing, definitely an important part of it. Number 2 is breach of fiduciary duty by an agent. So realtors, and again, this varies a little bit by state, but in my state, realtors are a fiduciary. So what does that mean? I typically describe it as like a lawyer. We're obligated legally to represent your best interests. So that means sharing confidential information with you, or sharing important information, also keeping your information confidential, not telling the other party how much you're willing to spend or how low you're willing to go on your house, that kind of thing. Really need to operate in your best interest. So sometimes a realtor who's not acting ethically might try to get around that and do what's best for them, not best for their clients. So this is definitely an important thing to keep in mind, that as a consumer, you have rights and your realtor should be operating ethically and in your best interest all the time. So the number 1 way that consumers and realtors get into trouble in a real estate transaction has to do with misrepresentation. So this is a pretty broad category, but often it might come down to the seller's disclosure. So when you sell your house, you have to fill out a legal form that asks you things like water damage, roof damage, pests, all those kind of things. If you falsify any of that information, you definitely could be in some legal trouble. And this does happen down the road after the closing. Somebody gets water in the basement. They said, oh, they never had that. There are stains and things that show it had happened before. They can definitely come back and probably sue the seller or get some other kind of compensation. This can happen with the legal boundaries and that kind of thing. So keep it in mind. Always disclose any issues. I always tell people every house has something. So just confess it or disclose it on your disclosure and say things like, yes, we had mice in the attic. We called a professional. They took care of it and we don't have a problem anymore. People will understand. So don't be afraid to disclose those kind of things. So that's it. Top 10 ways you can get into legal trouble. Again, thanks for watching all the way. I do have other videos on some of these topics. So please check those out here, or whatever. Thanks for watching.